EWTN, all across the Lone Star State.
It's GRN Alive,
bringing you faith, fun, and facts.
Live from the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network.
Join us on the show. Call
877-757-9424.
877-757-9424.
The GRN Alive Friday edition, coming to you live from North Texas in our studio in the beautiful city of Irving, Texas. We're glad to be with you. Today is February 21st, 2020. We are in the sixth week in Ordinary Time. Is that right? I'm looking at my notes down here. Anyways, I think that's right. I think Sunday is the seventh week of Ordinary Time. More importantly,
I'm looking at Quinquagesima.
Okay.
So
You're such a Quentin Jayzia kind of guy, aren't you, Dr. Malloy? So anyways, regardless of which calendar you're following, it's good to have you with us. Our phone number during this entire hour, if you want to join in and be a part of the conversation, we always enjoy when you call in. It adds so much to the show. 877-757-9424. You just heard the voice of Dr. Chris Malloy, professor of theology at the University of Dallas. He's also the author of a blog called theologicalflint.com. That's the address. I guess the blog is called Theological Flint.
Yes.
You just kind of tackle theological issues.
Sundry issues. I do post this thing afterwards, the link to it. And contemporary issues and also perennial issues. I like to go back to church tradition and basically defending the perennial relevance of Catholic dogma.
And the book is called Refuting
Against Recent Heresies,
Diffusing Confusion.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, I'm working on it.
Okay. I just like to remind you on a weekly basis, just in case the guy escapes your.
I know.
I've
got to work on Karl Rahner that I'm working on too. Okay. So I've got a few things on my plate. This spring break, hopefully, I can bang out a number of things.
All right. Very good. Cicely Anderson also is here. She's running the board, and she's going to have our newscast in just a minute. Some interesting news. I'm just going to tease it. I'm not going to say what it is, but some interesting news about Mother Mary Angelica, right?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome.
We'll say no more.
All right, say no more. Other than that, she's going to get an honor. Okay, I'm saying too much, all right?
I spent a lot of time on that newscast. You cannot give it away.
Just kind of highlight all the stories that Cicely's going to tell us about in a moment. All right, Diane Xavier is running social media flawlessly this morning, and we can be found on Facebook, we can be found on YouTube, and also on Twitter as well, and all expanding to all the different platforms. I love, I've told you before, I love Len Oswald's Family Minutes that he runs, and one of them talks about the 8 ways that you could listen to the Guadalupe Radio Network, and I'm not going to go over all of them because Len covers it really nicely, but again, the app, of course, the good old-fashioned radio station like most of you are listening to right now, and the live stream, but also those other platforms as well. Okay, so we're 5 days away from Lent, and we're also exactly 2 weeks away from the drawing for a 2020 Cadillac CT5. Somebody's life is going to change in 2 weeks from today, and it could be yours, but it won't be if you don't buy tickets, okay? So I just encourage you to get tickets. I had a wonderful lady. We were at a parish last weekend here in North Texas, and a lady called me yesterday, and she said, "Are you guys coming back to this parish?" And I said, well, no, we only visit once. And she said, I am so sorry, and I missed you, and how can I get tickets? And so I've had other people say many times, I know, I may not win the car, but I just want to support the Guadalupe Radio Network because I believe in the mission. And that's the reason to buy tickets. The car is a little extra bonus, a little gravy on top of the mashed potatoes, so to speak.
So how do you buy a ticket?
Thank you for asking
Oh, my
that.
goodness. That was beautiful.
I will sell you your $100 worth after the show, Dr. Malloy. But no, I would say I recommend contact your local general manager and see if he can get you some tickets, sell you some tickets. That's the best way, if you can do that.
Online.
Get out to one of the parishes. You can do it online also. Yeah, grnonline.com. So anyways, it's easy online, but if you want the old personal touch and contact your general manager, and he would be happy to get you some tickets. But we are running out of time, and March 2nd is the last day to buy tickets. All right, let's see. Lent begins on Wednesday, and, of course, you should already be thinking about what are you going to do. Don't just give up the candy or the chocolates. You want to do some prayer, some almsgiving, some fasting. And you may be saying, who would be a good model for Lent? Who should I emulate, And how about St. Mother Teresa? Okay, just one suggestion. There's a lot of suggestions. And interestingly, we are going to focus on her in the last segment of the show today. Linda Schaefer lived and worked with Mother Teresa for many years, took thousands of pictures with her and learned a lot. She has a website called MotherTeresaofCalcutta.com, and she wrote a book. It's a pictorial called Encountering Mother Teresa. And she is going to join us, along with her friend, Msgr John Esseff, longtime friend of Mother Teresa. Msgr John Esseff is an exorcist, but I don't think that's necessarily going to come out in the conversation because that would really take us, off in another direction. But just as an FYI. And so they're going to join us to talk about Mother Teresa and maybe what we could learn from her, as we prepare ourselves for Lent. And so it's interesting. I don't. Did you ever meet Mother Teresa,
No.
Dr. Malloy?
No.
No, I didn't.
A friend of mine was studying to be a priest in the order that's inspired by her.
Yeah.
So he got to meet her.
My sister went to the University of Dallas and had this semester in Rome, and there was an opportunity they had. She graduated in 99, and there was a time when Pope John Paul II, of course, the Pope at the time, and Mother Teresa were together in a room, and they said the University of Dallas students could go and see them together. And then some friend of hers had some emergency and said, "Can you come back to the room or whatever?" And so my sister missed it, but perhaps she was doing the better thing, helping a friend in need. All right, it is an election year, in case you didn't know.
What?
And they're going to have an election in November, Sissel.
Wow. Okay, maybe I should start looking into that.
All right, things are heating up. If you don't believe it, did you watch the Democratic debate on Wednesday night? Wow, that really, really got heated. And one of the big topics is socialism, and it came up in the debate. And there's a book that Trent Horn from Catholic Answers has co-authored with a lady by the name of Dr. Catherine Pakaluk, graduate of Harvard, assistant professor of social research and economic thought at the Catholic University of America. And it's called Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? All right, so we're just going to kind of throw that out there. Can a Catholic be a socialist? Well, Dr. Catherine Pakaluk is going to join us after Sissel's newscast and talk about that. What do you predict the answer is going to be, Dr. Malloy?
You can, but you shouldn't.
So you think you can?
No, I said you can, but you shouldn't. I'm just
I
playing.
mean, you can,
okay.
you can
Okay.
physically,
You're not
yes.
allowed.
You wouldn't be a Catholic in good standing, right?
No, you're not allowed.
Okay, not
Well,
allowed.
By allowed, I mean, of course, it's contrary to
Right.
Catholic
Yeah, well, we
doctrine.
We can do
we got
whatever
free
we-
will.
yeah,
we
we can do
can
what we
be
I was
liars
just being
and-
cheeky.
Get a little testy, huh? All right, so that's the show today. And, of course, join us on all of our various platforms, Facebook, good old-fashioned terrestrial radio station. That's what I like to listen to. But if you like to see us, if just listening to us just isn't quite enough.
We look pretty fabulous at this time in the morning.
My goodness, yes, see Dr. Malloy's bow tie.
2 espressos.
Yeah, so anyways, that's thanks for tuning in. Again, the phone number, we'd love to hear from you if you have a particular interest in these topics, or you maybe met St. Mother Teresa and you'd like to share your experience. 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424. Let's now go to Sissel Anderson with a look at news. Hi, Sissel.
Good morning, GRN listeners. Following the Democratic debate on Wednesday, presidential candidate Elizabeth Warren has urged fellow Democratic candidate Mike Bloomberg to sign a contract that she herself penned that would release those who have made allegations of Bloomberg's sexist and misogynistic behavior from his non-disclosure agreements. The billionaire candidate faces claims from the 1990s, which involve several crude sexual remarks towards women, and that upon learning that a female employee was expecting a baby, he responded with "kill it." At the debate, Bloomberg brushed off a question about the claims and pointed to his record of hiring and promoting women within his company and at City Hall when he was mayor. He said that he has no tolerance for the kind of behavior that the Me Too movement has exposed. Meanwhile, President Trump continues his 4-state trip in the West this week with a rally in Colorado Springs. Locals camped outside the venue hours in advance. During the rally, he honored 3 veterans from the Battle of Iwo Jima, as well as taking the opportunity to celebrate the Democrats' inter-party squabbling, criticize the recent Academy Awards, and the Best Film winner, Parasite. Trump's campaign poll numbers have improved since his impeachment trial wrapped up in January, and his campaign has broken fundraising records, raising $60 million in January and $14 million this week in California alone. Mother Angelica, founder of EWTN, will be inducted into Alabama's Women's Hall of Fame this March, along with Janie L. Shores, the first female on the Alabama Supreme Court. Born in Cleveland, Ohio as Rita Rizzo, Mother Angelica joined the Poor Clares of Perpetual Adoration in Canton in 1953. She dreamed of opening a monastery in the Deep South, so she used her charisma, entrepreneurship, and gift for teaching to raise money for the monastery. Mother Angelica began giving talks locally and writing mini-books on religious life and social issues and grew a following. She began recording her talks for a television audience with a CBS affiliate network in Birmingham in the mid-1970s. In 1981, she launched the world's first Catholic cable channel, the Eternal Word Television Network, in the garage of Our Lady of Angels Monastery with only $200 in seed money. It's because of her faith and dedication that you are listening to Catholic Radio right now. With the news, this is Sissel Anderson.
All right, very well put. Thanks, Sissel. And it is now 11 minutes after the hour. We are going to take a very, very quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the topic, can a Catholic be a socialist? This is a topic that I'm very, very interested in. We're going to have an expert, Dr. Catherine Pakaluk, and she, along with Trent Horn, wrote a book called Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? So 1 minute break. Stick with us. We'll be right back.
Solidarity is rebuilding Catholic healthcare in America. We conform to the moral guidelines of the Catholic Church, so you never have to worry about your healthcare dollars paying for anything that violates your conscience. From conception to natural death, we strive to serve all healthcare needs, protect human life, celebrate families, and promote the dignity of all people. Join Solidarity in restoring and rebuilding authentic Catholic healthcare by signing up at solidarityhealthshare.org, a sponsor of the Guadalupe Radio Network.
Catholic radio was there for me when I needed it. Even though I didn't think I needed it, it was there for me. I want everybody to know that I'm giving, not so that I can sit there and say that I gave to GRN for any other reason but this. I want that radio station to be there for anyone else who needs it also. They may not think they need it, but it's going to be there for them, whether it's in the future, whether it's right now. I want that radio station to always be there for them, just like it was there for me.
The Guadalupe Radio Network. Radio for your soul.
And we are back, and this is GRN Live Friday edition, 12 minutes after the hour now. Thanks for joining us, 877-757-9424. Dave Palmer, Dr. Christopher Malloy, and Sissel Anderson. And just also a reminder, after the show, I forgot to mention this, we're going to have a little after show, and it's going to be a little more extended than it has been in the last couple of weeks because we didn't have a lot of time. Kind of talk a little bit more about the issues on a less formal basis, and so hope you can hang around on that. That's on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter as well. And Daniel DeMore, I didn't mention, he's our intern. He's here as well. He likes to join us for the after show as well. So let's get right into it. And we are joined by Dr. Catherine Pakaluk, and she is an assistant professor of social research and economic thought and a faculty fellow at the Institute of Human Ecology, the Bush School of Business at the Catholic University of America. And she joins us because she has co-authored a book with Trent Horn called Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? And I also mentioned that she and her husband, Michael, are the proud parents of 8 children. And so congratulations on that. Catherine, thanks so much for joining us on the show today.
Hi, Dave. You're welcome. I'm glad to be with you.
And we have a fellow PhD academic, Dr. Christopher Malloy from the University of Dallas here with us.
Good morning.
You may hear some other voices.
Good to have you with us.
All right. So I guess let's start off by talking about, and we've got some clips from Wednesday night's Democratic debate, which the topic came up, and I know you've had a chance to listen to those as well. But can you kind of define terms for us, Catherine? What's a socialist? How does it differ from a communist? What is socialism?
Yeah, so for all practical purposes, from our perspective and our vantage point, political socialism is the same thing as communism. I mean, there's not a lot of reason to nitpick on that point. The socialism that the popes were worried about at the beginning, and that the popes are still worried about, is a socialism that kind of attacks the fundamental structure of the economy as being one in which, let's just say, personal obligations and personal responsibility is the structure of things, right? So there are various ways we can do that. The government can kind of enter in a very radical way, abolish private property, right? And we think about places that are very radical, like Venezuela. And there can be kind of softer ways of approaching the subject where, only certain enterprises are nationalized or socialized, but then others are left to private enterprise. And so there's a variety of ways this can happen, but that's sort of the bigger picture.
Very nice. And, traditionally the church, I just got a text from a friend, and he said, hey, tell everybody to read Rerum Novarum by Leo XIII. And at the same time, some people have accused our current Holy Father, Pope Francis, of being a socialist. And so has the Catholic Church been pretty definitive about this? Is there, different interpretations from different documents of the church, or has it been pretty much, a pretty consistent message from the church historically?
Absolutely. The church has been really univocal on an absolute rejection of socialism from the beginning. And your friend is quite right. I mean, if you read Rerum Novarum, kind of the first 17 paragraphs gets you what you need. And then that message is repeated over and over and over, and sometimes with a slightly different flavor for different circumstances. But certainly in that first 100 years of Catholic social teaching, because these large totalitarian governments were such a threat, the popes, many of them were standing on their heads to say, be careful, guys. This isn't what it sounds like. And be careful for the lies and the fictions and the pleasant dreams. You need to be a people of reality. I think that's a very interesting subtext that's always been present when the popes are talking about the threat of socialism.
Yeah, the nature of the deception of the apparent attractiveness. Could you speak to the anthropological errors at the root of, and even Marxism, but socialism as well?
Yeah, I think that, if I'm just thinking about the way in which, present day, we'll say self-identified socialists, people like Bernie Sanders or AOC or some of the others, they often talk about rights, and if you go back to Rerum Novarum and you look at that language on rights, Pope Leo was thinking a lot about rights, but the church has always thought in a classical way about rights as corresponding to human duties and obligations. So that anthropological question you're raising has to do with what's the structure of the human person, and why did God put us on earth? And apparently, the entire voice of the Christian tradition, the Judaic tradition, is sort of reminding us constantly that we are here to live out a duty of sort of gratitude and piety towards our Creator. So we are sort of here, sort of free of ties and free of obligations. There's all kinds of things we're meant to discern. And then, of course, it works out that we're not just sort of islands by ourselves. We're meant to discern not only piety and responsibility towards God, but towards the other people that we are meant to live out our lives tightly dependent upon. So that structure is really the important thing. And actually, you find that even in the sort of philosophical writings of Karl Marx, you find this persistent rejection of, I'm not going to be dependent on anyone, and I'm not going to be responsible for anyone. So this universalization of responsibility, right? The whole state is going to take care of me, really amounts to kind of rejection of individual responsibility. And you can find that thread all the way throughout this kind of philosophical underpinning, which of course the church stands radically against. No, you are responsible. You are responsible for, to God, for each other in a very specific way. This particular child depends upon you and not on the state. There's no getting out of that. Really important.
Sorry, Catherine Pakaluk is a co-author of a book, Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? And we'll ask her that question point blank here in a moment, but we're getting a little bit of background here. She co-authored it with Trent Horn, and of course it's available hopefully at your local Catholic bookstore. Try there first. You can also go to Catholic.com, which is, I think, the publisher. You can tell me otherwise where people can find it. And she is from the Catholic University of America. And you talked about rights, and I want to play a couple of the clips because it was a theme that came up, at least in part, in the Democratic debate on Wednesday night. And I know you don't endorse candidates, and we don't either, parties. Right. But again, this is a topic that's very big right now. Yeah. And Sissel, if we may, play the second cut first, where Bernie Sanders talks about democratic socialism, and he brings up this issue of rights. And I just want to get your comment on that. So here's clip number 2.
We must recognize that in the 21st century, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, economic rights are human rights. And that is what I mean by democratic socialism.
All right, a couple things there. Economic rights, what exactly does he mean? And also, he's throwing the adjective democratic in front of socialism, and how does that change things?
So kind of two issues, but I'll take the second one first. democratic socialism is a red herring. I mean, it's kind of it's meant to make it sound a lot better. I mean, we're not for totalitarian socialism; we're for democratic socialism. But in fact, in practice, right, there are very centralizing tendencies of socialism. It's very difficult to maintain anything like a normal spirit of democracy in a socialist arrangement because the state has to control in an undemocratic way all of the various sort of features of economic life. And in fact, that turns out to be completely impossible for any well-meaning state and certainly impossible for a ill-meaning state. So the democratic part is a red herring. There's nothing special about democratic socialism. It's still socialism. On the economic rights part, this is the kind of thing that socialists use and say, which sounds very nice, but really has no practical political meaning. We know politicians need to say things that sound nice, but as soon as you start to define what economic rights might mean, you kind of get off into the hinterlands very quickly. On that point, I kind of want. So he says, well, economic rights are human rights, and this is what this means to me. And I go, well, yeah, but if we're thinking about the structure of the human person, economic duties are human duties. What are the obligations? Up to there, I agree with him, right? Like I have duties to work hard, to provide for my family, to give of my excess. I mean, right? The church isn't promoting a system in which the wealthy or the successful, and even the moderately wealthy, don't have really strict and severe obligations to our brothers and sisters. That doesn't have anything to do with the state kind of guaranteeing basic levels of income, which the state can't do anyway.
It's interesting. So, I mean, economic rights, the church has something to say about that. One of those rights, of course, there are others, but one of them is private property. But I have a question. So, the politically correct movement to me is kind of an analogy, and I've been studying it, at least, in my armchair. And as like a philosophical theologian. No, but it's important to think about the essence of it, and it has a moral force behind it, and I think that's its power.
It does.
I think it's similar with the socialism that Sanders and those are touting it, and I think it ties in with the deceptiveness of its presentation. So my question is, could you comment on the church's diagnosis? Especially, if you look at Pius XI or Pius IX, the diagnosis of the birthplace of socialism as a reaction to exaggerated, to extreme conditions emerging from liberalism.
I mean, gosh, that's a big question, but you're so right. I think if I hear you correctly, to tie this together with a kind of spirit of the age, if you will. The political correctness we experience now, certain forms of liberalism that were emerging. I do often tell people, you can't read Rerum Novarum in a vacuum. You've got to read all the other things that Pope Leo was talking about. I mean, you got to feel sorry for these guys. I mean, they are facing massive changes in economic life, political life, church life, all at the same time. So Leo is just actually, I'm so deeply admiring of the things that he handled. But this moral correctness, and I think political correctness, you pointed how it relates to the sense that this is the deceptiveness, we'll put it that way. Something that Pope Leo said many times in different ways. He said, well, here's the tragedy. This is a thing which is actually going to hurt the people it's meant to help. And so there's already a lie baked into it. It's not going to help the poor. It's going to make it worse for them. But then it's not just a lie. It's a lie wrapped up in a kind of moral imperative, right? That the socialists and various promoters of socialism, you have no heart if you don't want to, organize economic life in this way. So that's that political correctness that kind of like, well, don't we feel bad for folks? But let me remind you that Pope Leo spent the vast majority of Rerum Novarum, and as did Pius XI in Quadragesimo and his other articles, they were much more concerned about what is the remedy for human weakness and for sort of social problems. So it's not as if, we see this at the pro-life movement, right? We're constantly accused of merely wanting to restrict people's rights to do things and not caring about mothers in crisis. Nothing could be further than the truth, right? If you want to look out there and find people walking with expecting mothers, you find, just an overwhelming number of Christians doing this. And in the same way, the popes were kind of like, look, actually, the church has so much to tell us about how it is that we can help people. We're not asking that people stay poor. This is not Pope Leo's vision. It's just that this way of thinking you can rise out of poverty isn't the way. But let me tell you how. And then, of course, he says, well, obviously, the church is the chief helper in people's getting out of their condition. Why? Because the church promotes virtue and provides grace. And there's no other source of that. So that always gets forgotten, that the church has a solution. It's just sort of forgotten.
All right. Catherine Pakaluk is joining us, and she is from Catholic University of America. We're talking about a book called Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? And I promise we'll get a straight answer. We're going to ask her directly here in a moment. But I do want to play another one of these clips from the Wednesday night Democratic debate. And I've got a couple of them. I hope I can play them all. But this is where you talk about the socialists trying to make it more palatable to people. And in this particular clip from Wednesday night, Bernie Sanders actually quotes Martin Luther King Jr. And I, for the life of me, because I'm not as smart as you guys, don't quite understand what he's talking about. He's saying the rich are living as socialists, but the poor are not. And so we'll play the clip. It's clip number 3, Sissel, and you guys can comment on what exactly does he mean by this. Here's Bernie Sanders.
When Trump attacks socialism, I am reminded again of what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, and I quote, "This country has socialism for the rich, rugged individualism for the poor," end quote. And that is the difference between Donald Trump and me. He believes in corporate socialism for the rich and powerful. I believe in a democratic socialism that works for the working families of this country.
All right, so what's he talking about?
Well, it's hard. I think it is kind of hard to know. But certainly, socialists, and you don't have to be a socialist, progressivists of all stripes, and really, frankly, a lot of, to my knowledge, a lot of economic conservatives who are nothing like a progressive or a socialist have been interested in calling out the ways in which political and economic factors allow it to be the case that certain rich corporations or people or individuals can get kind of carve out some special treatment. The wealthy in any system, socialism or capitalism, the wealthy can always, use their wealth to kind of make things a little bit better for themselves. You can call that socialism, call it crony capitalism, as many of my colleagues do. It's a wrong thing. It's a bad thing. But it certainly doesn't mean, well, gee, like, because they've got some sort of, corrupt situation, let's extend that to everybody. I mean, that seems to be Bernie's logic, and I think that's kind of silly. And then, of course, to wrap it up in somehow like the moral, status of Martin Luther King seems ridiculous to me, because to reinvent Martin Luther King Jr. as some kind of radical socialist is just absurd.
Yeah, there's another clip. I'm just going to play the last one and then
Sure.
bring Dr. Malloy. He can comment as well. But, where you got a billionaire and a millionaire arguing about socialism and how many houses they have. And then Mayor Pete comes in later on and says, I only have one house. And so this whole idea of elitism. But this is, of course, billionaire Michael Bloomberg. Capitalist. He's done well for himself. He's done well, kind of shooting back at Bernie Sanders about his own personal wealth. So here's clip number 1.
The best-known socialist in the country happens to be a millionaire with 3 houses. What did I miss here?
Well, you'll miss that I work in Washington, House 1.
That's the first problem.
Live in Burlington, House 2.
That's good.
And like thousands of other Vermonters, I do have a summer camp. Forgive me for that. Where is your home? Which tax haven do you have your home?
New York City, thank you very much, and I pay all my taxes.
All right, so wealth and socialism incompatible with each other? Is Bernie right? Hey, I got 3 homes. It's okay. I can still be a socialist. Is there a problem there?
I don't think there's a problem, because I don't have a problem with people being wealthy. So I do have a problem with people who are wealthy and who have worked hard for themselves, who then think that let's take that structure of things away from other people, which I think is what Bernie is up to there. But I always find these kind of debates about like who's most embarrassed about their wealth to be a little bit ridiculous, in the sense that kind of the debate about socialism always very quickly comes around to this kind of like, well, what are the benefits we can get for people? Like this, right? Just this whole like but I kind of feel that what we would like to do is, sort of shift the discussion to kind of what is the best avenue for human creativity and potential. And you never hear that. You never hear, the entrepreneur coming out and saying, hey, creating jobs for people, this was the greatest privilege of my life. And if I could make the political system such that it was easier for people at every level to kind of unleash their creative potential. That's what you want to hear. These kind of socialist, progressive conversations rarely include that. They're like the gladiator lords, kind of deciding, which of us has a better vision to divide up the spoils. Really? What about in the next round when there's nothing left to divide up?
There's a question I have with regard to just thinking about prudence and the role of prudence and typically the need for being there in a concrete situation to make a judgment. It seems that the centralizing tendencies of a socialist solution prohibit, a local person exercising prudence in the distribution of goods. It's just kind of a blanket, there's some kind of universal law in anonymous spaces.
And that's so correct. One of the things we try to do in the book, to come back to the book, is we try to, there's so many pieces we can't tackle, but we do try to spend some time on the importance of local information in price levels and determining, so prices are really best understood as little packages of information. And that information is coming from all of these thousands of, hundreds of thousands of local decisions that people make when they determine what's best to buy or invest in or to purchase, consume in their areas. And so there's not any other easy way to sort of, again, centralize. It's not, it's embodied in people. So you just have to either, get that information through price signals in the marketplace, or you have to attempt, again, the impossible. It's not possible to socialize that sort of thing, to get that central information from people. So there's something very kind of, if you will, beautifully democratic about a working price system. Again, markets don't always work, not in every case, but they sure as heck work most of the time, and we want to respect it, at least understand what's going on if we want to try to come up with some workarounds. We try to bring that in. So this is not, the treatment we make is not purely a moral one, which of course you can make purely a moral argument against socialism, but we do try to bring in a few of these pieces about information, how economies work.
All right. The book is called Can a Catholic Be a Socialist? Catherine Pakaluk, along with Trent Horn. I find it interesting that the two of you are working together. There's this apologist with Catholic Answers, and you being a professor of social research and economic thought at the Catholic University of America. How interesting. So just have a couple minutes remaining, and I want to get to that very pertinent question that is the very title of the book. Can a Catholic be a socialist? And I've been teasing it the whole interview. What's your answer? And maybe you can elaborate a little bit. We got a couple of minutes.
Okay. Well, the answer is no. And, our subtitle of our book is The Answer is No, Here's Why. So it takes us a few chapters to get there. But for all the reasons we mentioned, in part that the history of the church has always been against it. The Christian tradition has always been against it, going back to the beginning, in spite of some revisionist, I think, treatments of the subject. And then I think human nature really speaks against this. So the church isn't championing some contra natura version of political life when she is against socialism. She's attempting to champion, human nature. So the answer is no. Those are the reasons. And then you did point to this question about our collaboration. I just want to say that Trent is just a fantastically gifted apologist, an explainer, and a teacher at heart. We're both teachers at heart. It was a very natural collaboration. He reached out to me looking for someone with a bit more background in economics. He has a splendid background in history. It was a wonderful privilege to work with him, and really proud of what we produced.
So related, since it's Catholic radio, and we're talking about that, liberation theology.
And you got about 45 seconds.
It's the big thing. But what's very interesting is if you dig beneath even those most respected, let's say Gustavo Gutierrez, page 17 of his inaugural book on it, he's calling for, quote, a social revolution that would break this dependence and allow for a change to a new society, a socialist society. And he means classless, propertyless, private propertyless, etc. Any comment on that? Like, is another thing going on?
Real brief if you could, Catherine, because I'm sorry we're out of time.
Absolutely, really briefly. I mean, the liberation theologians are really just warmed over Marxists. They're maybe not even warmed over. They are classic Marxists. They're not Catholic. They're socialists. So it's especially dangerous because it's, again, dressed up in the trappings of Catholicism, and really has done so much damage to folks who deserve better.
Yeah, great topic. Can a Catholic be a socialist? The answer is no. I wanted to save the subtitle because you give the answer in the subtitle, which is interesting. Catherine Pakaluk along with Trent Horn. Catholic bookstores, of course, hopefully they're carrying it. Where else can people
get it? It is on
get
Amazon.
Okay, it's on Amazon.
It's right at Amazon, although we prefer you to get it from thecatholic.com, but Amazon is great. I buy from Amazon a lot, too, so it's all out there.
Any other websites that you want to promote as far as people learning more about you or your work or anything else?
People can follow. I would just recommend Catholic Answers in general. It's just a wonderful wealth of information. We have a few things up at the Bush School at Catholic University. I'm not quite as out there on social media as my co-author is, but and I'll try to do better.
Well, you got a husband and 8 kids and a busy job at a big university. I mean, come on, you got a pretty good excuse. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Great speaking with you.
Yeah, great talking to you, Catherine Pakaluk. And again, the title of the book is easy enough. Can a Catholic be a socialist? And the answer is no. All right. Dr. Malloy, I know you got to get to class. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Yep.
And,
great to be here.
Cecil Anderson and I are going to come back in a moment and talk about, as we prepare for Lent here in a few days, we want to talk about Mother Teresa through the eyes of a priest and a photojournalist. Linda Schaefer, close friend of Mother Teresa, lived and worked with her and wrote a book called Encountering Mother Teresa. She and her dear friend, Msgr John Esseff, a longtime friend of Mother Teresa, are going to join us, and we're going to talk about this book and Mother Teresa and their experience and how she might help us get the most out of Lent. Okay, we'll be back right after this.
Often, we are asked what is the difference between EWTN and the Guadalupe Radio Network. EWTN, the Eternal Word Television Network, provides at no cost to the GRN about 93% of the programming that we play on our stations. The promise of free programming was made by Mother Angelica to any radio apostolate who would buy the physical radio station. So, the radio station you are listening to in your car, in your home, on your computer, or on your smartphone is paid for and operated by the Guadalupe Radio Network. The relationship between EWTN and the GRN is a blessed one. We are the largest EWTN affiliate in the United States, and so glad to be able to carry EWTN's quality programming. We are both nonprofit organizations, so we are always in need of your prayerful and financial support. This is Len Oswald with this week's GRN Family Minute. We are your Catholic radio station, radio for your soul.
Amy is a real GRN listener, and so to help tell her story about buying a GRN raffle ticket, we hired an impersonator of LSU football coach Ed Ogeron.
When my husband and I found out we could support the GRN by buying a raffle ticket to win the new Cadillac CT5 Luxury, we called 888-784-3476 and bought 5 tickets for $100.
That's the best deal in America.
Later, my husband surprised me by buying even more tickets by going to grnonline.com.
You're a good man. Go Tigers.
I'll bet you know by now that Amazon Smile is a great way to support your favorite charity, and supporting the Guadalupe Radio Network while you shop is easy. Step 1. Just start off at smile.amazon.com. Step 2. Choose La Promesa Foundation as your charity. La Promesa Foundation is the parent company of Guadalupe Radio Network. And Step 3. Enjoy your shopping. Amazon will donate a portion of your purchase to the La Promesa Foundation, and it doesn't cost you any extra. La Promesa Foundation and Guadalupe Radio Network, thank you.
Welcome back to GRN Live, Friday edition on a Friday. How about that? 877-757-9424. Dave Palmer, Cecil Anderson, Diane Xavier is running all of our social media, and Daniel DeMore is going to join us for the after show. Right when the show ends, we continue on social media, Facebook and YouTube and Twitter for a little while and talk a little bit more casually, I guess you could say. I don't know what exactly that means, but we've got another segment on the good old-fashioned regular show, and we are going to talk about the beloved Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta, with 2 people who really got to know her well. I never had a chance to even be in the same city as her. I never had any encounter, but we all, the whole world was touched by her. Linda Schaefer is a close friend of Mother Teresa, and she lived and worked with her. In fact, Linda has a website called MotherTeresaOfCalcutta.com. She's also a speaker, and she has for decades now traveled the world and the country speaking about her relationship with Mother Teresa. And she's written a beautiful book called Encountering Mother Teresa, which is a pictorial hardback, beautiful book that just has, you just got to see the cover shot, which just brings out the joy and the community of Mother Teresa and her sisters. And so she joins us for this segment. And also Msgr John Esseff, who is a longtime friend of Mother Teresa and also learned a lot from her. And so I want to go straight to these two wonderful guests who we're blessed to have on the show with us this morning. Linda Schaefer and Msgr Esseff, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
Good to be with you, Dave.
Thank you. Linda, let's start with you. You met her, I think, back in the mid-'90s, if I'm correct. Interesting. Tell us how you met her, and then before too long, you were actually over in India working with her. What was the genesis of you spending so much time in your life dedicated to working with Mother Teresa?
Well, first, let me begin by saying that I feel so privileged to be on the phone with you and Msgr John Esseff, because it really is Msgr who spent decades working with Mother Teresa, beginning in Lebanon, where he first met Mother Teresa's sisters. And I met Msgr Esseff after the beatification in Rome, which we both attended. And so in connecting the dots, it was after this the beatification that I called Msgr Esseff in Pennsylvania, and he invited me to come up and interview him. But it all began for me in Atlanta, Georgia, when Mother Teresa came to Atlanta June 12, 1995, to see the new AIDS hospice home that was opened in the early 1990s. And I met her for the first time at the airport. And it was there that, to my utter surprise, she came right up to me. And in my heart, I heard her say, "Come and see." And it was that very, that look, that gaze that prompted me to leave everything behind and go to Calcutta and embark on a 6-month mission, first trying to convince Mother Teresa to allow me to photograph the work. And then in the end, her asking for basically a lifelong commitment from me. And so, which I've been doing for 23 years. And on that journey, I had, of course, the great privilege of meeting Msgr Esseff, who he can tell you more, was the contemplative spiritual advisor, the contemplative branch of the Missionaries of Charity, and the pontifical director in Lebanon in the mid-1980s. But it was when I went to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I was at the seminary where he was at the time, and I sat with him for the first time at a breakfast in the seminary, and he is this beautiful, quiet, humble man. And, as the interviewer, I was going to ask him about his time with Mother Teresa, and in his soft, beautiful voice, he said, "So tell me about your time with Mother Teresa." But Msgr, I'm here to interview you. And he goes, "Well, first I'd like to learn about you, Linda." And immediately, which is so often the case with anyone who encounters Msgr, the tears were coming down my face, and a priest next to us said, "Oh, don't worry, this happens all the time."
Well, let me bring Msgr into the interview here. Msgr,
Yes.
Again, thank you so much for joining us. And Linda had shared some information about you, and she said that, of course, close friend with Mother Teresa. She helped you in your effort in working with priests. You consider her message prophetic. So if you could tell us about your relationship with this saint, and also what you learned from her.
Mother has always been known, Dave, for the tremendous love she had for the poorest of the poor. That's when you hear of Mother Teresa, you hear of the lowliest of the low were the ones that she was going to care for. I remember once being with her, and we were in Rome, and she was going down to see Pope John Paul II, and she had an interview with him. And she was supposed to get a piece of land, property, in the Vatican, which is so rare that she would even have this opportunity for her and her sisters to administer to the poorest of the poor in the Vatican, so that they would have access to being in the Vatican as the poorest of the poor. And so she was going to get this piece of property, and this was going to be such a dramatically important interview. On the way down with her sisters, there was a man lying in the street. She said to the sister, "Stop the car. I've got to see him." And she got out of the car and went over to this man, and indeed he was dying. And here he was in the street in Rome, in the gutter, actually just laying on the road. Mother began wiping his brow, holding his hand, and being so comforting to him as he was dying, as she had done for thousands and thousands in the home for the dying. And as she was ministering to him, her sisters began looking at their watch and tapping it and saying, "Mother, you've got this appointment with the Pope." And they kept tapping the watch and looking. She kept looking up, and then she said finally to them, "You go ahead and you take that appointment." Remember how serious it was and important. It had been taking them months to set this up. She has come to Rome for this from Calcutta. They went on ahead, and she stayed there in the street, ministering.
Yeah, that says so much about her. I want to open up the phone lines for. I'm sorry, Mads.
Tell him. She said, "Tell him I'm with Jesus."
Wonderful.
Tell the Pope I'm with Jesus. You see, that's what she saw in every poor of the poorest of the poor. She saw Jesus.
Amazing.
Anyway, that isn't what she did for me. What she did for me, because I was always very interested in the poor. My whole priesthood was set up for administering to the poor. And up until I met her, that was my focus. She said to me after I had given a retreat to her sisters, she said, "What you should be doing is teaching seminarians and teaching priests." And that really refocused me. And that was 30 years ago. And when she very much convinced me, as I gave retreats with her in various places of the world, she very much convinced me that should be my life focus. And if you remember 30 years ago, the sexual crisis had not come crashing down on our heads. But ever since then, that's what I've been doing. I'm 91 years old now, and for 30 years, I've been administering and teaching men who are studying for priesthood and men who are ordained. And I really believe that this prophetic refocusing of my life has been her most profound effect on me.
That's amazing.
So many.
The phone number, 877-757-9424, 877-757-9424, speaking to Monsignor John Esseff and also Linda Schaefer, and the book is called Encountering Mother Teresa. And Linda will share with us how you can get a hold of it here in a moment. Linda, I want to go back to you and just talk about some of your experiences. I know you wanted to share an encounter you had with not only Mother Teresa, but her sisters in Calcutta, one of the last times I think that you were with them. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I was working in Saudi Arabia these last 5 years, and so I was able to travel to India a number of times. And once I had a contract with our Sunday Visitor, the publisher, I decided to take another trip to India to try to get some more photographs for the book, because the book is a photo book with a lot of text, of course. And so, again, I had to go through the whole process of trying to get permission again, and this time from Sister Prema, who's the Superior General of the Missionaries of Charity. And again, they asked me to write a proposal, which I thought was really, it goes back to 23 years when I wrote Mother Teresa, my first proposal. And I was given permission, but it was on my very last night that I was there that has left me with the most profound sense of what the legacy of Mother Teresa really is. And Monsignor Esseff could also clarify that it is in the work. It's in the sisters and the brothers who travel and work and open homes all around the world. But on this particular night, they invited me out on their night apostolate onto the streets of Calcutta. So it was just 9 sisters and myself. And we brought with us tea and sandwiches and eggs and food. And we got into a hospital ambulance van, and we drove down Lower Circular Road, the largest street in Calcutta. And within minutes, of course, we stopped the van, and we were all pouring out of the ambulance and serving the people who were dying on the streets, literally. And so what were the sisters doing? But they're saving these poor, desolate people from their ultimate grave on the streets of Calcutta. So it was working with the sisters all night on this particular, my last night in Calcutta, that I saw the really the central work of the Missionaries of Charity is of satiating the thirst of Jesus, the mission that Mother Teresa was given by Jesus himself on that famous train ride to Darjeeling, India in 1946, and when she was called by Jesus to leave the Loreto order and to go out and form her own unprecedented order of the Missionaries of Charity and to serve the poorest of the poor on the streets of Calcutta and around the world. And not only that, but also in being a mother to us all. And you could see that in the legacy of the sisters as I was working side by side with them that night, that they truly are mothers to everyone.
Yeah, amazing. The book is called Encountering Mother Teresa, and we're joined by Linda Schaefer, the author, along with her dear friend, Monsignor John Esseff. And I gave out the phone number. We got a call from Maria in North Texas, and she wants to, I think, a comment or a question. Real briefly, Maria, thanks for joining us on GRN Alive. How you doing?
Hi, good morning, Dave. God bless you. Okay, really quickly. Mother Teresa has been my very, very, very best friend and good friend spiritually. I wrote to her, and she wrote me back and sent me a tiny little prayer and her picture. So I have been helping the sisters to feed the people, volunteer on Saturdays, sometimes go there in afternoon. And that's my closeness with Mother Teresa, being close to her sisters and helping them once in a while. And the Lord,
where are you?
Yeah, she's in North Texas. Maria, thanks for the comment. I wanted to, because we're running out of time, get back to Linda and Monsignor Esseff. And it amazes me how many people I hear, like Maria, say, I wrote her a letter and she wrote me back. And you're thinking, how in the world does she have time? She probably got 10,000 letters a week. And Linda, and then also Monsignor Esseff, I just wanted to close out with last comments, because we're down to a few minutes here, about not only your last comments about St. Mother Teresa and the book, but also about perhaps what we can take from her life to help us have a better Lent. If you could each take about a minute, and then we'll have to close out the show. Linda, can you go first?
A minute of, okay, so...
The clock is ticking.
Well, I think she also changed the direction of my life, as she did with Monsignor. You know, I've been working as a photojournalist in Atlanta, and when she called me to India, I dropped everything, and I changed my life. And now, after my teaching career, she also led me into the teaching profession. And I just feel that until the day I die, I will be serving her in one capacity or another. I love when I go into the Mother House, when I go into the chapel of the Mother House, that's where my Catholic faith. Monsignor, by the way, was instrumental on my path to becoming Catholic. When I went to visit him, I had just entered the RCIA program, and I recall this one day. I was going to go with him on his apostolate to the prisons because he serves the prisons. And he said, no, I was talking to Mother this morning. This is how he is. This is why you cry. And he said, I want you to sit with Jesus today because you need to develop a relationship with Jesus. And so he left me in the chapel in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And so I think that I just, I don't know what my life would have been like without Mother Teresa and also without Monsignor John Esseff.
All right, Monsignor John Esseff, I'll give you the last word. We've got about a minute remaining. If you could just comment on anything that Linda has said and perhaps even close us with a blessing if you don't mind.
Yeah. One time a lady met Mother Teresa and she said to her, good people do good things and holy people do good things. She had an idea that Mother was holy. And Mother said, no, good people do good things, but holy people do God's will. There's really a difference. The person who is holy first listens to God. We are not do-gooders. We just don't run around doing good things. But we first listen to God, who is the source and the center of all love. And he tells us each what to do. And as I bless each and every one that is listening to this program, I think Mother would be right here with us saying amen, along what we were now celebrating her memory on earth. May Almighty God bless all of you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And may each of you take the time to first listen to God and what he's asking of you.
Amen.
And respond, amen.
Thank you very much. Monsignor John Esseff, really, really appreciate that. Linda Schaefer, thank you for your time in putting this wonderful, wonderful book together. Again, visit MotherTeresaOfCalcutta.com. The book is called Encountering Mother Teresa by Linda Schaefer. Thank you very much, Linda. Thank you, Monsignor John Esseff. And thanks to Dr. Chris Malloy and Sissel and Diane and Daniel. And don't forget, we'll have the after show just here in a few minutes, only on the online social media platforms, okay? Thanks. This has been GRN Alive. Tune in Monday, same time, with Joe and the team from Houston for GRN Alive Monday edition. God bless you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for listening to GRN Alive.
From the studios of the Guadalupe Radio Network.
For more faith, fun, and facts,
join our email list.
Just text the letters GRN to the number 42828. That's GRN to the number 42828.
And may your Friday be filled with the joy of the Lord.
All right. Well, hello, everybody, and thanks if you tuned in to the regular radio program here in the last hour. We had some really interesting conversations and topics and guests, and something that Joe and the team down in Houston have started is what we call the After Show. This is strictly on the social media platforms, so if you are still watching on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, we welcome you to join us, and we're going to try to monitor these as much as possible. And so my name is Dave Palmer. Diane Xavier is here, and she might chime in here and there, but she's mostly just kind of toggling all the cameras and making sure this looks all right. Cecil Anderson has moved from the control room into the studio.
For my close-up, yes.
Yeah, that's right. So people can see what you look like, not like in the next room, but actually up close, right?
Yep.
All right, and Daniel DeMore is joining us as well, and he's a young guy. He's a college student. He's studying radio, TV, and he's an aspiring apologist. He kind of sounds like Trent Horn, who co-authored the book with our first guest today. How you doing, Daniel?
Pretty good. How are you, Dave?
All right. So let's get right into it. And again, are you able to monitor all the platforms?
I'm monitoring all three. I just got on
Okay.
all of them.
Well, I want to make sure that we. I want to make sure we have these comments. So there is one comment that came through Facebook, and that's the only one I'm watching. It says, "I love this. I love Mother Teresa. I want." I went to the place she worked in India, and I have met a few people that have met her when she was still alive. Greetings to all of you from Hong Kong. Wow, isn't that cool?
So we have an international audience today.
Yeah, that's a country that's very much in the news these days.
Oh, yeah.
God bless you there, Maria, in Hong Kong. So, all right, so let's talk about, we'll get to Mother Teresa, and let's talk about socialism first. And you guys are young, in your 20s, and so thoughts, Daniel?
To be honest with you, I go to school with a lot of people who like it. Like in my classes I take at TCC, a lot of them are like, yeah, go Bernie Sanders. They wear Bernie Sanders T-shirts, and they're all voting for him, and I don't know what all the hype is. So I looked up what socialism is, and it's, if you don't know, it's basically just like, it's like shared. Everything it's kind of like communism, but it's not to the same extent. I guess like all the production and distribution, everybody owns it, but I guess the government kind of regulates what people own, and people here who like capitalism kind of fear that because they don't want the government regulating everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of why a lot of people are like, I don't know if I really want somebody who's into that as our president, but some people don't mind it. So.
But part of the appeal, I think, is that he's talking about relieving, education debt, college debt. I remember I had to get a loan to get my master's degree, and when I got my master's degree, it was thousands of dollars that I was going to have to owe over a period of 10 years. I can imagine back then if some presidential candidate's talking about, we'll relieve your debt. But the problem is somebody has to pay it.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't
disappear.
Yeah, it doesn't disappear. If I say, you still owe $15,000 on your car, and I'm going to relieve that. Well, okay, that's good for you, but who's going to pay it? I mean, somebody's got to pay it, all right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. So your thoughts?
Oh, well, I think it's really interesting that we were talking about this today, because yesterday, in a class that I help out with, they did an exercise where they just went out and had to get, I'm a film student, they had to go out and get a little short interview on the street, and they decided for some reason to choose, one group did, to choose politics as a discussion. And it was just interesting because the guy interviewing asked these two college students, what are your top things that you are going to be, the issues you're going to be voting on when it comes to your, or they're important to you when it comes to the presidential election? And obviously college students, the top three things that they mentioned were the minimum wage being raised to $15, the student debts or college education just being free, much less expensive, and then also healthcare being free
or universal.
Universal. And it's interesting. It made me ponder it a little bit because I haven't had a lot of discussions with this with my friends at college, even though I know a lot of them definitely are like Bernie Sanders. This is the way to go and stuff like that. And it makes sense for the age, like you're mentioning, Dave. It makes sense because they're all trying to get through college, not be broke. I mean, it's the broke college student thing. But I think the problem is that there are good aspects. There are good themes in socialism that are helping the poor. There's like good ideas that are very disguised, like they're using those good ideas disguised for something that's not as good.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of college students and a lot of people in general just buy into that without looking deeper.
All right, Diane, you want to chime in? Okay, because, we've got two people in their 20s. Diane, I won't give her exact age, but she's in her 30s, right?
Yes, late 30s.
And I'm in my 50s. So we have everybody about the 40s represented here. Okay, Diane, what are your thoughts?
Well, the cost of college has risen like over 50% in the last who knows how many years, and it's just so expensive. These, like a state university cost $20,000. When I went to school, it was only like $10,000. And I mean, what are we going to do about that? I mean, that should be priority, is not increasing tuition so drastically over all these years. I mean, back in the day, college was a lot more affordable, and now it's not anymore, even to go to a public university. So, I mean, to say we're going to clear all this debt, well, first, why is it that college students have so much debt? It's because the cost of tuition has skyrocketed.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And just making everything equal share is not going to necessarily... Is that really the solution to the problem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's like saying car prices are going through the roof, so let's give everybody a free car.
Yeah,
who's
paying for
Diane's
these cars?
Point, we'll say, well, why are they so high? Is it tariffs? Is it, what's going on? Are the parts too expensive? I mean, well, why is it so expensive?
Because they're building all these new fancy buildings. Not that the buildings not need to be that fancy, but and then all these football stadiums.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, it's a good point because some of these universities are spending exorbitant amounts of money in order to recruit the top football players or basketball players, and that's being paid by the guy who wants to come and get a degree in economics.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like, what's the connection there?
Yeah, like prices have for college education have skyrocketed, but I almost would think that the quality of the education you're getting has plummeted a bit because it is focusing on the things that aren't as important.
Yeah,
so
I think their priorities are messed up. I think that's why the money's not being used effectively.
All right, let me throw this out. I was going to, if I had time with our guest, Dr. Catherine from the Catholic University of America, and I'm as anti-socialism as the next person, but I want to say this quote from Acts 2:44 through 45 and have our amateur apologist, Daniel and Sissel. They said, all who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their property and possessions and divide them among all according to each one's need. That almost kind of sounds like socialism, but they didn't say the government came in and forced them, right?
Yeah.
So what would you say about that quote?
Yeah, so that was what I was bringing up. So it seems like they did it freely without the influence of the government, and I think I think that we should kind of strive to do that within our smaller communities. But yeah, the main problem I think we have, at least us from a conservative background, is the possibility of government tyranny. Because when you give all the control to government and they're calling all the shots, it can be problematic. So I think the Bible is referring to something that a small community does without the influence of, the big government that's calling all the shots. It's a different kind of thing, but it does sound like it, but it's not exactly the same.
Right. The other thing that's interesting is socialists almost, and I'm not going to paint them with an exclusive broad brush, they almost always are atheists. I mean, socialism and communism is almost entirely, I don't know of a communist regime that isn't also atheistic.
Right.
So why that? If you're talking about helping the poor and raising people up, why could that not be compatible with Christianity?
I wonder if it's almost like a replacement for Christianity. You know what I mean? Because obviously in our faith, we are taught to share our wealth with the poor. Like we should be. That Dr. Malloy I think brought up having prudence to share our wealth and stuff like that. So I wonder if people who are socialists are like that, they don't have that, and so they think that the whole government needs to be in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, the government takes the place of the church, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I feel like that's what it is.
Yeah.
I've also heard people say because if you're in an atheistic worldview, you don't have any source of objective morality, so everything is actually in subjectivity. So I've talked to a few atheists, and I would say, well, what do you consider the law? And so I consider it from a higher source, but to them, law is only determined by the court of the land. So I think in their mind, like she said, they're kind of replacing God with government. And so that's where all morality, that's where all legislation is coming from, is just the people. And the problem with that is that with our human grasp on things, we can change morality. It's always changing. It's always moving. But with an objective source, it stays static and it doesn't change. And I believe that's where we should derive our laws and judgments from.
Yeah. And if you're a millionaire and I say, I'm going to take 70% of your money and give it to the poor, well, you there's no virtue there. You were forced to do it. But if you feel like, you know what, I got a lot of money and I owe it to God, and if I don't do this, there might be repercussions in the next life, so I'm going to voluntarily give a lot of my money away, well, then there's virtue there, right? Yeah. And again, if you just somebody... And I know people that say, I don't give to the poor because my taxes are too high. Now, I'm not saying that's a good justification, but they say they're already taking a lot of my money and giving it to different programs, so I'm done.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and if the government's in control of what money's going where, like Daniel was saying, what they consider moral and not is not going to necessarily align with different people's faiths, and that could be very
paying for abortion.
Exactly. It becomes very problematic. We already have that issue a little bit in lots of different ways, but yeah.
All right. Anybody asking any questions on the various social media outlets there, Cecil? And I'll just remind you, this is the after show here on GRN Alive. On the Guadalupe Radio Network social media platforms. We thank you if you are watching or you're listening in. Daniel DeMore and Cecil Anderson and Dave Palmer. Diane Xavier is here as well. And we're going to be a few more minutes. All right, let's talk about Mother Teresa. Say Mother Teresa. I know that you guys are a lot younger than I am, but as I was growing up, and I mean for a long time in my even going back to high school, college, and the 80s, the 70s, the 90s. I mean, she was really very, very prominent. She was the face of goodness to the world. And I was so proud to be Catholic, because here's this Catholic that really epitomized what goodness was to everybody. I mean, she was it. And now she's a canonized saint. And so, I don't know, what has she meant to y'all?
Well, for me, I think what she's meant to me is like taking courage to try to, if there's like a big problem, and you see like problems in the world, go out and be the change, that you want to see in the world, that kind of popular quote. So yeah, I see that as, going up, standing up for what's right and doing your best to make a change. But obviously no one can fix everything, but the fact that you're actually standing up to make a difference is really what is important,
Yeah. Cecil?
She's really just the epitome of how we should be living our life. I particularly in the office here, Dave, we have that big quote on the wall about the, forgive them anyway, be kind anyway, which has really touched me, especially because there are always times in your life when you have this opportunity to help somebody, and you think a little too hard about it. You think a little too does this person really deserve my help? Did they get themselves into the situation? You start going through that thing, overthinking that. And that quote is very beautiful because, if you are kind, people may accuse you of ulterior motives. Be kind anyway. It's very beautiful. And so, she just had a lot of wise things to say about how we should be treating others.
Yeah, that is a great quote. And she also had another one that said, how can you say there are too many children? It's like saying there are too many flowers.
Yep.
And she was very pro-life. She had that one, I don't know if you're familiar with this, Daniel, where she stood up at, I think, a national prayer breakfast, and President Clinton and his wife Hillary were there.
Oh, yeah.
They're pro. You remember that. And she went strong about
really
abortion.
did.
And she wasn't there to make friends. She was there to just tell the truth.
But she was loving. It wasn't like she was sitting there trying to beat people down. She was just simply telling truth lovingly.
Yeah.
Because, she's very, very humble person, and she would never, say, oh, I'm better than you, or she's just saying, this is not right. This is not what we're supposed to be doing. She's kind of like Mother Angelica, very firm in their beliefs, and because they knew it was the truth, but always with love.
Yeah. I want to talk before we go off about what's happening with Mother Angelica, maybe a little bit more detail about that. Diane, I want to get your input on Mother Teresa, because Diane is of Indian descent, and of course Mother Teresa. I used to think Mother Teresa was Indian because she, just worked in India, and she was Albanian, and so. But anyways, Diane, you want to jump in and talk about Mother Teresa?
Yes, when, like Cecil said, when you think of that quote about Mother Teresa that be kind to them anyway, that's how Jesus lived. And Jesus taught the secrets to the kingdom of heaven. So, and Mother Teresa's quote, all of that stuff, I mean, you can that's a glimpse of heaven, how you should act and behave. And so I just think that quote is beautiful and very strong, because if they persecute you, Jesus said, let them strike you on the other cheek too, because, for the kingdom of God is yours, and it will be with you.
And she also went through a very long, prolonged period of darkness, dark night of the soul, where, we're not talking about a month or a year. We're talking about years and years and years. She had a lot of consolations in the beginning, and then God just kind of said, okay, that's going to have to kind of last you.
Right.
And she wrote about that in her diaries.
Yeah. Yeah, and that just proves that, we can do great things, but we're all human, and we all have those periods where we lose faith. But the fact is that she stuck with it. She said, I don't understand everything, Lord, but reveal it to me, and I'll stick with you. And she stayed with him till the end of her life, and I think that's a good lesson for all of us when we have those confusing, kind of dark times in our life. But also kind of back to the point she was saying about, being Christ-like, and, they even if you're doing, good things, they'll still persecute you. Not to rag on Christopher Hitchens, but he really attacked her a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And
what was his point in all that?
Well, his whole point was because he thinks that she didn't, they didn't have all the right resources to cure the sick. And I think he was putting a lot of pressure on her. And what I would have said to Christopher is, with all the money he was making, why didn't he do something about it? Why wasn't he out there on the front lines trying to supply the best medical supplies? So they were putting a lot of pressure on one person because she was in the media a bunch. But like I said, one person can't solve everything. They can make a difference. They can start a coalition, but they can't fix everything individually. So what I would have said to her critics is, if you got a problem with the way things are going, if you got money, why don't you start donating?
Just get in the trenches and join her. Roll up your sleeves.
There's a famous story from Archbishop Fulton Sheen where a guy came to him and I don't know and started complaining about all the riches in the church and why don't they help the poor, and I can't believe that back in the Vatican they got all this fancy art and I don't know. Have you ever heard the story? Bishop Fulton Sheen looked at him and he said, "How much money did you steal from the collection basket?" And the guy just kind of melted because he could tell that the guy was obsessed with money. He was obsessed with the church's money, and he's trying to justify.
What a gamble! Oh my God, I would not be confident in that. But obviously, he was divinely inspired. He had some insight there.
Yeah. So that was how much money did you steal from the collection basket?
Wow.
And he was right. And so I can't judge Christopher Hitchens. He died, and he was a famous atheist, and he's one of these media, high-profile atheists like Richard Dawkins. And you're right. If you have a problem with how somebody else is dispersing their money or their goods or what they're doing, just do it yourself, right?
Right.
And I think also maybe Christopher Hitchens, one of his cases was everything we do is self-interest.
Right.
Like if I feed the poor, maybe it's just because if I don't, I feel guilty, and so I'm really just trying to relieve my own guilt, and so it's really all about me in the first place. I think that's one of his points is that maybe Mother Teresa just had more guilt than other people.
And again, that quote answers right to it. People will accuse you of doing it, for selfish reasons, but do it anyway. That's the point. Because ultimately, even if you maybe were doing from a selfish place, that act is still good. It's still going to help somebody.
Yeah.
And that's the point.
Right.
And I think it also comes to, I think he had a slight misunderstanding of what the Catholic Church teaches about doing good things. Because the common misconception is, they do those good things because they want to earn salvation. But that's actually the opposite of what the church teaches. The church teaches that we do good things as a response to our salvation, right? And we do those good things as showing our fruits of how we love Christ now. And we do it because he commands us to love one another, not because we're trying to gain something.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I think that some people have those misunderstandings. If they were just to dive in, they could see, no, these people are doing it because they actually love other people, not just because of themselves.
And it was a Sunday school class I did actually years ago, a Protestant Sunday school class or youth group class we were doing, and someone brought up when people who are not Christian donate to charities or do a lot of good things, is that still good? And he said, well, are they made in the image of God?
Yeah.
And we're like, yes. And it's because he goes, well, because they're made in the image of God, they still have that thing on their heart to do good.
Yeah.
they can't, so yes, it is, of course, good.
And they can still exercise virtue, right?
Absolutely,
Especially the
absolutely.
acquired virtues. The theological virtues are infused, and so you can't work for those. They're just, God gifts them to us, right? All right, Mother Angelica, you want to comment on that?
That was so cool. So I was, looking for news stories this morning, and as I was doing it, I was listening to Morning Glory, and Teresa Tomeo, actually, with her news, came in, and she's like, Mother Angelica is being entered in this Hall of Fame, and I was like, what? This is so cool. So I looked into it, and yeah, so she, I was trying to find out. I'm assuming, though, that she's like probably the first, especially in Alabama, I'm going to say she was probably the first religious woman to be entered into this Hall of Fame, which is super, super cool. So yeah, they this nice old article in the secular media wrote up a little thing about her and had a pretty good biography of her, and so which is really nice and awesome that she's being entered along with the first female Alabama Supreme Court. That's like the level that they're holding her with. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's really, really cool. And clearly she's made an impact on this community, especially a community that is very much Bible Belt, country.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I pulled up the story.
Yes.
There's 90 other women that are in this Alabama Hall of Fame. Some are very famous names. Do you guys want to guess? Very good, Diane. Rosa Parks. Diane, okay, with a win. She shoots, she scores. Okay, also, there's one. I'm not familiar with this lady. Helen Adams Keller. Does that
no idea who she is.
Okay. All right, and now trivia time. Let's see who can get it first. Okay, Diana's not on a mic, but she can compete. The author of To Kill a Mockingbird.
Harper. Something Harper Lee.
Something Harper Lee. That's it.
It is Harper Lee. Okay, good. Yes. Sorry, it's one of my friend's favorite authors, so I would be reminiscent.
Something Harper Lee. I like that. She needs to add something to the beginning of her name. Something
I'm so
Harper
sorry.
Lee. No, that's all right. You felt pressure because you're sitting next to a very intelligent young man here, and you figured he was going to jump in.
Competitive.
Honestly, I was gonna say Jill Harper, so she was a step ahead.
For some reason, I thought Harper was the last name. I don't know what was wrong there, but I still got it.
All right, Rosa Parks, Harper Lee, and now Mother Angelica. I thought it would just be like the Hall of Fame was just like a bunch of like Alabama football coaches, like Nick Saban.
That's true.
All right,
but it's a female Hall of Fame. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's right. That'd be kind of hard.
Yeah,
that's
that
right.
would be hard.
It's the female Hall of Fame. Okay, thank you for that correction.
Yes.
Women's Hall of Fame. Not a lot of football coaches.
No, not a lot. One thing I will say funny that was about this article, I was reading through it and I was like, getting some different information. And I was copying and pasting a few things to save time when I was writing my newscast this morning. And when they said the eternal, they said what EWTN stood for, I was reading it as I was practicing and I was like, the Eternal World Television Network? Minor typo in that. It's the Eternal Word Television
so
Network.
they had it as Eternal World. Yeah.
I was laughing, and I was like, wait, I had to second guess. I was like, no. Why would it be the eternal world? We're going towards heaven. We don't want this to be an eternal world.
Yeah, interesting.
So I thought it was funny.
So, yeah, a little typo there. All right. Well, I think we're about wrapping things up. Anything else on your mind, Daniel?
Nope, not really. Just everybody have a happy Friday. That's what I'm saying. And I hope the weather gets a little warmer because I'm not a fan of the cold weather. 30,
it's a little nippy out there.
Yeah, 30 is tough for me as a Texan boy. So.
Yeah.
But it's warming up, Diane.
Yeah.
Yes, Lent starts next Wednesday.
Oh, yes.
Ash Wednesday, Lent.
Yeah, it
Start
does.
Next Wednesday, Ash Wednesday.
Saturday, Sunday, Monday, too. Okay, 5 days away.
Yes.
You guys got your plan? Your
Go to church,
battle
get
plan?
my ashes.
Yeah, get your ashes. Anything
Get
else?
your ash on. Oh gosh. I'm still working on mine. I always have these grand, elaborate ideas for what I'm gonna do for Lent,
I know.
and forgetting that I'm a college student with 2 jobs,
Right.
and that doesn't always.
You're going to take trips to faraway lands or
Well,
something?
I have this idea of I'm gonna do an hour of adoration every single
on
day.
broken glass,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
By the way, Natalie, our former intern, Natalie Petoskey, is watching, and she said hi.
All right. I talk about Natalie all the time because have you met Natalie?
She came in
one time.
That's right.
Yeah, and she got married a couple years ago. Has a little boy now.
Yeah.
But she came. She's a convert. She came into the church because her now husband's grandmother saw a bumper sticker. It's a long story, and actually, I've actually interviewed Natalie and her husband Jared. It's a very fascinating story, but maybe she can tell it better than I. But anyways, put bumper stickers on cars. It really does help.
Yeah.
All right. So good thought, Diane. Lent starts in 5 days. Get your plan going, and Anything else? Are we done? Have we exhausted everything that we need to talk about?
I don't know. If we continue talking, some silly stuff may come out.
Yeah.
like something Harper Lee.
Yeah. And I had a something that I heard by Father Leo Paddlinghug that was so funny, but it wouldn't. Yeah, anyway, so it had to do with Lent and ashes, and it was just so funny. But it was kind of one of those things in the moment that was funny. I don't think I could translate it too well. All right. Well, thanks so much. Good talking to all you guys. Thanks, everybody who's still watching on social media. We thank you for participating in the program. Diane has linked the story about Mother Angelica, inducted into the Women's Hall of Fame in Alabama. And we thank you so much. And don't forget, buy your raffle tickets from your local general manager, or else go to grnonline.com. The only way you can win is to buy a ticket, right? It's impossible to win without a ticket.
Yeah. Unless one flutters from the sky and lands in your hand.
Unless somebody else buys you a ticket, okay? There's always an exception.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, if you get the golden ticket, run home as fast as you can.
Yeah.
Don't tell
Is that like Willy Wonka?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's Willy Wonka.
Okay. Charlie and Willy Wonka.
That's awesome.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll have a great rest of your Friday and good weekend as well.